genuinely thought I was going to get cancelled. Like, that is a fact. Like, I absolutely thought I was going to get cancelled.
Hello and welcome to Love Lives, a podcast from The Independent where I, Olivia Petter, speak to different guests about the loves of their life. I am thrilled to be joined by Yomi Adegoke. She is here to talk about her internationally best-selling debut novel, The List. So welcome, Yomi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, for the few people listening and watching who have not yet read The List, could you please give us a brief premise?
So The List is about a beautiful Instagram famous couple called Ola and Michael. They're about to have an amazing wedding in exactly a month's time. No, it's not actually exactly a month, in nearly a month's time. And just before the wedding, an anonymous list goes up on social media accusing lots of different men of varying degrees of abuse. And dun dun dun, Michael is named as one of those men. Ola's a prolific feminist journalist who has to decide whether she, stands by her man, so to speak, or whether she believes what he's been accused of. And yeah, chaos ensues.
Yeah, and throughout the book, there's like a kind of countdown to the wedding.
There is, yes. Oh God, not me forgetting my own plot. But yeah, there is a countdown. There's like a ongoing sort of countdown per chapter, just to like however many days to the wedding. And yeah, just thought I'd pile on the pressure there.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I read it so quickly. And it's interesting because we are talking about this shortly after one of the biggest convictions of the Me Too movement was overturned, which was Harvey Weinstein's New York conviction, was overturned by the appeal court in the state of New York. I want to ask you about Me Too because I know that you started writing this book or were inspired to write the book shortly after the Me Too movement. Tell me about how Me Too kind of fed into the narrative of this story, because I remember at the time there were quite a lot of real lists like this out there, weren't there?
Exactly that. So I'd say like 2017, maybe early 2018, lots of different lists were going viral in various different industries that were accusing lots of different guys of different things. And I always say that like my initial knee-jerk reaction was like, essentially, there's no smoke without fire. And if you find yourself on a list like that, well, the likelihood is that you've done something to do so. And then I think just by virtue of being a journalist, I guess I felt slightly conflicted by the process. Not so much there was definitely an understanding as to why people felt the need to, take that route towards justice. I always say this, that like women in particular are routinely failed by, if not the police, the judicial system, all the way down to HR when it comes to reporting allegations. So I kind of understood that, but then simultaneously was, I guess, slightly felt kind of uncomfortable with just the idea that anything should be believed online. I don't think, and I didn't think then, that in any way that undermines the reality that the vast majority of these allegations aren't taken seriously when women do make them, and that the vast majority of allegations that are made to the police are true. I think it's between 2 to 3% only are fake. But we're not talking about the police, unfortunately. We're talking about social media. And as a journalist, as a fellow journalist, you know that when it comes to social media, it's slightly more complicated in terms of what we should believe and what we shouldn't. That's then kind of compounded by, a fake news crisis, but also, I want to call it an AI crisis. I don't think we're referring to it yet in that way, but it feels like a crisis to me. That also makes whatever we read online and what we see online even more difficult to believe. So, those I suppose are quite like new questions in terms of AI, and I guess fake news even in 2017 was still only like a budding issue. So essentially I wanted to write a long read that was nonfiction that kind of looked at the issues and the complexities, but it felt slightly early. The Me Too conversation was very much burgeoning, and I felt like it was kind of too early to problematize it and complicate that conversation. So I kind of sat on it for a bit, and then it came back to it during lockdown. And I always say it's because like everyone else is making sourdough bread and I can't cook. So I was like, I kind of need something to do. Why not write a book? Which makes me sound like super, productive, but it really was just because I was like, I literally have nothing else to do. But yeah, I always say, as much as it is a book that was inspired by those real life lists that were being disseminated, I do very much stress that in my mind it is more a book about the internet in and of itself. You could technically have the exact same plot about, you know, somebody who was receiving lots of like negative reviews on, you know, a restaurant that's receiving negative reviews on Yelp. It'd been a very boring story, but like it's possible to kind of have that same conversation about just truth and the internet. It's obviously more controversial and like interesting when you have it about something like this, but I think the kind of point about the internet being a very difficult space to, you know, have honest conversations and trust what to read and what you believe, kind of is a universal one.
I want to come back to the internet because I think there's so much to talk about there. But just going back to the Me Too plot, what's so interesting about your book is that you include Ola's perspective and Michael's perspective, and they kind of run in tandem with one another, which is so interesting because you get the sense of what it's actually like to be accused of something like that, which is not a perspective that we get really ever, for obvious reasons, I suppose. But I think it's really important that we get that perspective in fiction and in real life, because I don't know how you feel about this, but I sort of sense that if we're ever going to achieve any kind of meaningful change and progress in this area, we need to hear from everyone.
I agree, for sure. I feel like, especially when you're talking about something as complicated as, you know, allegations that are made on a platform like social media, which is like largely unchecked. And obviously, as you know that as journalists, we're kind of bound by certain regulations, which mean that when we are reporting on certain allegations, we know that, you know, they're airtight. You really have to be cautious about what you say. The thing about being accused of something anonymously on the internet is usually whatever it is, it spreads quicker than the kind of like correct narrative does. So I've seen lots of things where, you know, something's been said about somebody and then the person's actually come out afterwards and it's been like, well, actually that's not true because, and here are loads of receipts and here's lots of evidence that show that isn't true. But I mean, the original tweet that said something negative about them has got, you know, hundreds and thousands of retweets and impressions, and then the follow-up doesn't go quite as viral. So I think, like, in terms of including Michael's perspective, I thought that it was important because, I mean, originally it was just going to be from Ola's perspective, because I thought that just seeing what it is to be a woman who's connected to a man that's accused of something that serious, I thought that was an interesting perspective, and also one you don't really see, because usually if you're a woman and you're connected to someone in that way, whether it's, you know, as their romantic partner or as a friend or as a colleague or as a sibling or mother, you're immediately seen as complicit. You're seen as though you probably knew what they were like, X, Y, Z, unless you kind of turn your back on them immediately. So it was just going to be Ola. But then I felt like Michael's perspective was an interesting one because, you know, you don't actually know whether he's done what he's been accused of right until the end of the book. And because it's a book that looks at, you know, whether these allegations, any allegations that are made on the internet anonymously, I think that's the really like kind of crucial part to look at. Because it's looking at the complexities of that, I thought that it would be interesting and as you said, important to look at the ways in which that would affect somebody, because it's very difficult to defend yourself against an allegation online in particular, especially if you don't know who's made it, because that's just kind of the way the internet works.
It's also really interesting reading Ola's perspective of like someone close to her being accused of something like that, because again, it's one of those things where like if you look at the stats of sexual violence, it's something like 1 in 4 women have been raped, most likely by a man.
Right.
How many men do you talk to who would say, "Oh yeah, I raped someone"? So there's there's a discrepancy with the numbers, and I think when we are close to people, we can't see them as capable of causing harm. But again, there's a discrepancy there as well.
100%.
So it's so important to have all these kind of complicated conversations, and they are so complicated.
Yeah.
But the internet thing in particular, I think, is interesting to look at now. Because again, making it relevant to what's happening at the moment. Like, I don't know if you've seen Baby Reindeer.
I have, yeah.
But, the internet furore around that is wild.
Yeah.
And it just shows you how, like you said, like it doesn't matter how rooted in truth something is. it can become global news, not necessarily on a media level where it's rigorously checked, but like to the degree that people are talking about it that much, that no one really cares if it's true or not.
100%. There's no regulation, and now, I've been kind of watching. I watched Baby Reindeer and thought it was incredible, and now I'm watching like the fallout, like kind of behind my fingers, and just feeling really uncomfortable with the turns that it's taking. And I guess I think that is the complex thing with social media, just the ways in which, we literally have seen this now, like play out in real time, in real life, with, certain allegations that were made very confidently by, hundreds, if not thousands of people online who were kind of playing, detective and, kind of, I guess, off the back of the true crime, wave, kind of self-styled detectives accusing somebody of something and then having to, have the writer himself kind of come out to defend that person and say it's actually not this person, and then him having to, I guess, threaten legal action. And even despite all of that, I'm still seeing people say that it's that person in question, which just shows how, I'm always saying the internet is the Wild West, and I do genuinely think we're going to look back in hopefully 10 years. I think that's quite optimistic, maybe like 20 years, and be like, my God, that was an insane time. Like, in the same way we look back on like lobotomies, feet binding, and we're like, that was
because it's getting worse. It's getting so much worse, and it's terrifying. And these are people's reputations and livelihoods at stake.
This is the thing, and I think this is why, for me, like, it's such a disingenuous and like frustrating conversation to have when people kind of. I mean, obviously, the vast majority of people I've spoken to have been like, oh my God, I've been having these conversations on WhatsApp with my friends in private about like how uncomfortable this stuff can be. But then you get lots of people that are like, oh, you shouldn't actually talk about something that is, that is controversial in this way. And you shouldn't look at like the potential of movements being weaponized by the wrong kinds of people because, it's dangerous, it rocks the boat. But I mean, I just think that we're in such a dangerous time. And the internet is so unregulated, and even like outside of things like the Me Too movement, I'm talking like quite specifically now about like Twitter as a platform /X. But I remember seeing a rise of there was like a rise of a very particular kind of account on quote unquote Black Twitter that would like go really viral, especially in America, that would be really politically active and talking about all these social justice issues, and would build huge followings, honestly, in their like hundreds and thousands. And I remember like a BuzzFeed kind of expose revealing that like dozens of those accounts had actually been like Russian bots, and like showing how, and it was like a huge scandal that like everyone just has completely moved on from and completely forgotten about. But it was like a really big thing. And I remember being like, oh my God, I follow this account, and it being like unveiled as a Russian bot that was pretending to be a Black woman and pretending to care about Black female issues, and like had, gained traction and trust and access through doing that. And that story isn't particularly, new or even, I'd say, surprising. I mean, I'm always saying we grew up on Catfish, which is kind of like, in its most primordial kind of like safest form. But yeah, I think it's kind of intellectually dishonest to not act as though, any movement, and that does mean movements such as Me Too, which are so important. And because even, with what you were saying about the overturning of Weinstein's conviction, it does show like just how difficult it is to, receive justice as a woman, as a person, that's experienced any kind of abuse within an industry. We're seeing this unfold in real time. But that, I think two things can be true at once, which is that, that is the reality for women who have experienced, assault and abuse within industries, that it's so difficult to receive justice, and simultaneously that the internet is a very, very flawed medium for justice. Not because women can't be believed or trusted, but because the internet can't be believed or trusted, and because it's a very, dangerous place for anybody, or for it's a place where truth and nuance, I'd say, go to die.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, because sexual violence is one of the most nuanced issues of our time. And I think if we don't allow for nuance in that conversation, we're never going to get anywhere. And people don't like to at all.
Yeah.
And not just in sexual violence, but violence against women more generally. I mean, the obvious example is the Amber Heard Johnny Depp
Right.
trial. I don't know if you've listened to this podcast about Who Trolled Amber, but it's all about, you know, the allegations about bots being heavily involved.
Oh, I didn't listen to that, no.
A social media campaign against her during that trial and that influencing the jury. And there's a whole, it's really interesting. But I think another thing that interests me about this and worries me about it is that it creates a culture of distrust of
Definitely.
mainstream media as well.
Exactly.
And I think there is an amalgamation of kind of social media chatter in mainstream media. And because so few people outside the media perhaps understand the rigmarole that is involved in a thorough investigation, there's a lack of belief in that system and lack of trust in that system. So the example I'm thinking of is the Russell Brand allegations.
Right.
And when they came out, you know, I was having conversations with friends about it. And they were saying, well, you know, none of the women are named. You know, I'm not going to, why should I believe it? You know, I don't, and because they don't know, they kind of talk about it as if it's a series of tweets.
Yeah, exactly.
And I feel like that's a symptom of this culture that you've written about.
100%. And then also it's putting the press, I'd say, under like really undue pressure to race to the bottom, essentially, and report on things with less like rigor and with less fact checking. But then even just in terms of what the point you made about a lack of trust, I would say this is why I'm so cautious of, you know, the kind of routes to justice that are outlined in the list, whilst being incredibly understanding towards them, and critical more of the process than the actual like intention, is because the reality is when things aren't fact checked, or when they are, you know, when it's kind of like when it's open to the public in a particular way, the minute one allocation or one thing on there is proven untrue, the entire document, the entire kind of conversation is then thrown out. And I think that is one of the biggest concerns that I've always had, and something that we've literally seen. I remember before I even started, before the book was released, but I started writing it at this point, I'd been following the kind of, you know, shitty media men list that had gone, you know, the kind of, you know, primordial list of all lists. And I remember like following like a legal case that had like occurred off the back of, you know, that list. And a guy was saying that what he was accused of wasn't true. And then he took not even the person who'd made the allegation, but the person who had published the list to court. And I think it got thrown out, but then I know he was paid damages. And now to this day, like a lot of people use that example to kind of rubbish other allegations. And that's why I think that, yes, it's not comfortable. Yes, it's difficult to have these kind of conversations, but I think it's super important because we're always allowing the wrong people to have these conversations. Currently, any conversation that's like critical of cancel culture, and this kind of like approach is usually coming from the right wing, and it's usually those people that are using it to like undermine, you know, women's truth and silence women. And I feel like on the left, because we're like slightly less comfortable having these conversations and kind of have our heads in the sand about it, we've allowed like conversations about cancel culture and like things like guilty till proven innocent, which are like really kind of founding like left-wing principles, to be commandeered by the wrong kind of person who comes, you know, to this debate from a kind of more disingenuous and like bad faith route.
I mean, like I said in the intro, like the list has done so astronomically well,
Oh,
and I'm
thank
so
you.
proud of you for it, and it's so well deserved. What have some of the more surprising reactions to the book been? Because obviously, like you said, and like we know, this is a controversial topic.
Yeah.
So what has kind of shocked you most about how people have engaged with it?
Well, first of all, when I first wrote it, honestly speaking, I genuinely thought I was going to get cancelled. Like, that is a fact. like, I absolutely thought I was going to get cancelled. So I was very surprised to, like, make it out in one piece. Like, touch wood, there's still time. But that really was, like, a genuine kind of, like, fear, I'd say. I wouldn't say fear, because I say this a lot. Like, I was writing about race and racism on the internet in 2012. So, I mean, I think like I am used to like, you know, I guess that was a time that predates like, you know, the whole 2020 like Black Square Summer like thing by like a good like 8 years. So I know that conversations around race and racism and even feminism have like changed a lot over the past few years and have become quite mainstream. But back in the day when I was like writing these pieces, like, you know, they were very divisive. I'd say even amongst people who were, considering themselves to be progressive. So I think I'm very used to like writing stuff that I know is going to kind of like get people's backs up. It's definitely not my first rodeo by any means. And I think it's because I know that like I'm always coming from a good faith perspective for sure, but also it's like I know I'm never alone. I know I'm having lots of conversations like privately, and I feel like I actually have a platform to be able to say these things. And I know that, again, as I said, I'm not coming from I'm not playing devil's advocate remotely for the sake of it. There are lots of survivors that get in touch with me and sort of talk about this idea of like holding two ideas in your head at once and saying like even though like we're looking at complicating the conversation around this approach to justice, they've also empathized with that idea of, being cautious about what you believe online because they've actually been victimized by that. And I thought that's been really interesting. And I think also lots of people who I think have got in touch with me discussing that, the statistic that we've just spoken about, the reality that it really is just between 2 to 3% of allegations that are made to the police are made up. I wouldn't even be surprised if it was less than that because it's a very rigorous process with the police and no one puts themselves through that for no reason. Yeah. But then I've had lots of people speak to me about kind of just our conflation of that statistic with online. And I think that's been really important for me, for people that have kind of spoken to me being like, oh, that's something that's been resonant with me, but I'd never really thought about the reality of that potentially being different online, and the fact that the internet is a very different space that allows for very different behavior. And some of the messages I've received about things people have lied about online and made up online in a completely different context, but that have been so damaging and cruel. I've heard all kinds of stuff just in terms of the things, how low people will stoop.
What was one of the wildest things that you heard
One of the wildest things, well, I'd say one of the wildest things that I've ever come across was actually within research, funny enough, not even something that someone messaged me, but I remember reading about an instance of road rage where a woman in America, of course, had driven past another woman and I think the woman had cut her off or something, I can't drive, so I don't know, she did something wrong. And the other woman within her maddened state remembered her license plate, went home, put her information into the internet, somehow got her name and information, and then put her details into this thing called a home wrecker website where you can put someone's name in and all kinds of abuse about that person, and then once you've submitted it their SEO, so that if I was a lunatic, I could go to my house and be like, Olivia Petter is an XYZ who did this with my husband, and then if someone types your name in, it knocks off your website, it knocks off Gold Rush from the search results, it knocks off Millennial Love, everything gets pushed down, and then it's just all these allegations at the top.
That is terrifying.
And she didn't know her. It was just madness. She was just so pissed off, and apparently her life had been falling apart and all these things were going wrong. But I just thought, wow, you don't know this person, and that's as far as you would go, and that's when you don't know someone. So it's kind of imagine having that exact power, which we all do, and actually knowing someone and actually being upset because someone has has actually been unfaithful to you, or has genuinely upset you, or owes you money. It's just, the potential for evil is limitless. I know it sounds really bleak, but it really is. And I think it's very naive when people are people lie about everything on the internet except within this space. And it's well, you don't actually know who's got access to that space. And that's the reality of the internet, because all kinds of people have access to the internet. I always say it's an invisibility cloak. And I think there's a lot of naivety within the conversation at the moment. We kind of engage with things as we'd like them to be, as opposed to how they are in reality.
We have to move on to discuss your loves. The first one I want to talk to you about is Brazil.
Oh,
because you said that you've been there twice, both during times in your life when things have been a bit difficult and you've been feeling a bit lost. So tell me about the first time to start with. How did you end up in Brazil of all places?
So I feel like anytime I go to Brazil, it's like I'm writing a book because I was writing Slay in Your Lane, or I'd written Slay in Your Lane. Like I think me and Elizabeth, my co-author and best friend, had like written Slay in Your Lane at this point, and we'd like sent it out to publishers. I think that's where we were in the journey. And I'd just broken up with like my then boyfriend, who is fab, and I'm like still very good friends with, and it was a very like amicable breakup. But you know, I was kind of just feeling like kind of lost at sea, and I'd always wanted to go to Brazil because like I feel like everyone did. Like I don't watch any football and have no interest in it. But when it was the World Cup, it's like if I wasn't supporting Nigeria, I'd be supporting Brazil for some reason. I don't know how, but like I just did. I think it had something to do with my older sister, and I think like loads of the best players were on that team. So like I just remember like my default was supporting Brazil, and I remember like I then got this really strange fixation with the place. I remember being in primary school and we had to write to different embassies, and I chose Brazil and like wrote them like, you know, this really like badly spelled, grammatically incorrect letter that said literally nothing at all. And I remember like, as you know, I think we were like literally 8 or something, and we all wrote these letters to like these different countries. I remember no one got a response back except me, because Brazilians are great, and they sent me like little flags and like all these little like bookmarks and stuff. It was really cute, and I just remember since then being like, I really want to meet these like people. I was like, you know, they were just. I just remember the letter had been so kind and so kind of like taken like the ramblings of like an 8-year-old very seriously. So I remember going in 2016, I think, and not speaking a lick of Portuguese. I think the population, that's the English speaking population, is like under 11%. It's like nobody speaks.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no one speaks
Love
English
that.
there. And yet, like I'm always there. I'm like planning on going next year. Like, and I just remember having like the best time ever. It was like, it might have been my first solo trip, maybe, I think. It was definitely my first time like staying in hostels. And I just remember having like an absolute ball. Like, you know, I think you can't really say like an entire nation of people is one way, but I just remember like everyone being so lovely, and like all my fantastic conversations I had through like Google Translate. I just really fell in love with the place. And then this last time I went in 2023, I was like, again, like I think I'd written the book. Yeah, I can't remember. I'd obviously written the book, but there was something book related. I can't remember. I guess it hadn't come out. It hadn't come out in February. And I went, and I was supposed to go for 10 days, and I ended up like just staying for a month because I enjoyed it so much. I just think it's such a beautiful place, and it's fascinating. Like I really appreciate like the like even like the cultural stuff I think is incredible. Like so I'm Nigerian, and like the tribe that my family are from are Yoruba, and there's a lot of, I'd say, stigma still in Nigeria, like in terms of the traditional like African religions that were once like practiced pre-colonial traditions that were practiced, and I find it really fascinating. Like in Brazil, lots of it's been preserved, and like lots of them like speak Yoruba and they're like religious practices and stuff, and they kind of have like meshed it with like Christianity. It's actually the same in Cuba. And I think it's like really beautiful to see how those things have like survived, even if they haven't been able to survive. I mean, they have in some sense survived in Nigeria, but I think it's like it's quite stigmatized, whereas there it's like really celebrated, and it's just a really, really fascinating place. So I really love it, and I'm back again. And obviously that, mate, it's got carnival. It's just fab. Like I just had such a great time, and I think it really taught me a lot about like how you really can just like make friends with people and like not understand what they're saying.
How's your Portuguese now?
Horrendous.
Really?
Like, it's not like I'm not trying. It's like horrific.
It's just so not working.
Bad. It's so bad that I remember getting lost at the airport and like met like this one English speaking guy who like genuinely became my dad. Like he was like in his 60s, and he was like, yeah, like I speak English. Don't worry, come with me. And like I remember I was going to Salvador, and he was like, you know what? I'm like, I remember him being like, can you give me your like Uber? Like, you know, you can send a link to show that you've like made it home safely. And then obviously being a woman, I was like, well, what if you're trying to kill me? And then now you know where I'm going. Yeah. So I was like, oh God, I don't want to give you my like Uber thing. But then I was kind of like, I don't really feel like I have a choice. But he was like, oh, okay, I've seen you've gotten home. That's great. Tomorrow I'm taking you out with my daughter and I'm driving you around as a tour guide to show you Salvador. And him and his daughter, who like couldn't speak any English at all, just like drove me around Salvador. We all just like had lunch and he was like, yeah, next time you're in Brazil, come and stay with us. It was like the most, but I'm not joking. Olivia, I had encounters like that every single day.
You would
like,
never get that in London,
never,
ever.
Never.
People would literally
never.
Off and
Oh
die.
my God, do you think I'd ever give someone a link to like my Uber like drive in London? Like a woman just randomly gave me her like sweets on the train and was like, you look hungry, this is for the journey. She said it in Portuguese apparently.
Well, it's reassuring that people are still kind out there.
Everyone was so lovely and just really like, yeah, everyone was just genuinely very kind, and every single day I'd meet someone like that and they'd always be like doing something really lovely, and I was like, wow, like this is just really like, I guess, restored a lot of my faith in humanity.
So we've got 2 more loves to talk about. I just quickly want to ask you about your sisters, which is your second love. So you have 2 sisters.
I can talk about that so quickly. So my sisters are my favorite people on the planet. We're really, really close.
And are you middle or
I'm the middle.
Okay.
And yeah, I've got like my older sister, my younger sister, who, yeah, I'm so close to my sisters that when it came to like buying a flat, I literally was like looking for places within like a 10-minute radius from my little sister, and I found one that's like 3 minutes. So I live 3 minutes away.
Oh,
our postcodes are 2 letters different. And then like my older sister lives like 10, like literally no, lives my little sister and my older sister live together. My parents live like, I think honestly a 20-minute walk. Elizabeth lives 20 minutes away. My other best friend and my godson live like maybe 15 minutes away. And my other best friend, she's moving to Bromley, so she's giving me like half an hour. But like everyone lives really close. And so when I say sisters, it's like my biological sisters, of course, who, you know, I literally dedicated Slaying Your Lane to them. They're like my best friends. But my sisters is in my friends. I've got such fantastic friends, and most of my closest friends I've known, like, Elizabeth's my best friend and I've known her since uni for like 14 years. But like most of them, it's literally been since like secondary school, college friends were like kind of new to me, because it's like, oh wow. But like my godson's mum I've known since, the fact I call her my godson's mum now, and I've only just met him, he's only 5, but it's like, no, never ever. I've known her since I was 11. So yeah, my sisters are just like, it's like my best friends, my people. Like I'm very lucky. I have fantastic people in my life, like I truly do, and they're all girls. So yeah.
Finally, third love, and you're going to have to explain this to me because I Googled it. I still don't entirely understand what it is and what makes it so unique. Lifetime movies.
Oh my God, I love Lifetime movies.
What are they?
Oh my God.
Is it an American thing?
Yeah, so you know, like Lifetime Channel. On Amazon Prime, I know that they like have an endless well of just like films that are like, that they show on Lifetime that I think are non-ironically excellent. Because I think like they're just like, they're so brain smoothing. Like it's like you literally know exactly what's going to happen, and at each point they're so melodramatic, and I just love the insanity of them. And yeah, I don't know. Oh no, I think I got into them like just before, like this is when before like I moved out and like got my own place. So I'd like always be at my sister's house, and like she'd want to watch all these really like intelligent, like cerebral, hard-hitting films, and I'd be really tired. Like this is, I think, like, you know, post Slaying Your Lane, but we were still like writing other books, and sometimes I just wanted to be like brainless, especially because I often write about TV as well. So I was like, God, I don't want to have to think whilst I'm watching something. And then I just found Lifetime, where I was like, oh my God, these films, this is the same film with a different coloured hair actress and the identical plot about like baby snatching and like twins swapping identities. And I was like, I don't even have to think, but I am entertained. So I love Lifetime films. I think they honestly do a public service. And now there's like an equivalent on Channel 5 where they've got like every Monday they release like basically British Lifetime films that are like series. Like there's one called Coma where this guy like punched this guy and then he like fell into a coma, and it was just like melodrama. Like every single episode it just got more and more like insane. I was watching something called Love Rat, and it was about this guy had like stolen this woman's money, and this like normal like middle-aged woman like goes on this quest to get her money back, and she ends up with all these mobsters. And I was like, this is lunacy. I love Lifetime films, and anything that's like adjacent to it, anything that's just stupid. I think honestly, you don't want to watch something smart all the time, and everyone pretends they want to on Twitter, but I definitely don't.
No,
So,
neither do I. Reality TV all the time.
Mate, so I've got a column on it.
I know,
Do you know
exactly.
what I mean?
That is all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for listening and watching. You can watch all of the Love Lives episodes on The Independent. You can also listen to us on all major podcast platforms and all social media platforms and connected devices.